how does someone get that job? How do you become executive assistant for the president of the United States?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to tell my story and to talk with your listeners today. It was just meant to be, I guess, is the only way, whether you're a person of faith and you believe that God picked me from obscurity and dropped me into a place like that, or whether you just believe in destiny or fate. I think it was meant to be. I came from a regular middle-class family. My family were teachers and educators. I had no political ties. My grandma, though, she was a flag-waving patriot, and I think she taught me to have a love of country and also love the Dodgers and baseball. But we're talking about love of country right now. And so from a very early age, I remember just being fascinated with the whole idea of presidents and first ladies and the White House and Washington, D.C. But I grew up in Southern California, 3,000 miles away. It might as well have been space for all I ever knew about Washington, D.C. But life is funny sometimes. And I went to college at Pepperdine University right there in Los Angeles. And in the White House at the time was the great communicator. I didn't study politics because what are the chances that a woman would ever go into politics, especially living in Southern California? So I studied communications. And of course, during my study, I studied a lot about the great communicator. And he, in a lot of ways, was the convergence of everything I loved. So faith, politics. He was a man of, he was Christian and had great principles and values. He was a great patriot. He loved this country. And he lived in Southern California after he left the White House. And so that's how we crossed paths. He first came to Pepperdine. He gave a post-presidency speech at the university and then opened an office right near the university. Again, no connections, no chance I could ever work for somebody like that, right? Mm-hmm. But my dad taught me to believe that somebody's got to have the job you want, and it might as well be you. Mm-hmm. So I took a chance on an old typewriter, typed a letter to the office of Ronald Reagan, licked an envelope and a stamp, sent it off, never even thinking I'd hear from them. Was shocked when my phone rang, and it was the office of Ronald Reagan inviting me in for an interview. I was terribly nervous, but very excited and thought, well, if this is my closest touch to politics or somebody important, this will be it. So I went off to the interview, very excited, very nervous, didn't really have any idea what to expect, but had a feeling that my life would never be the same after that day, and it certainly was not. So I go to this interview. I think that it goes pretty well. At the end of the interview, I'm sitting in the lobby waiting for them to validate my parking. As a starving college student, I was really glad in an expensive office in Century City, they were going to give me parking stickers. But as I'm sitting there kind of exhaling, thinking things maybe went okay, the doors open on the other side of the lobby, and walking right toward me is Ronald Reagan. And I'm going to be honest, it's a little embarrassing. I kind of panic because I don't know what to do. I've never been around anybody important, and he's flanked by United States Secret Service. And I think, well, should I run? Should I hide? Do they know who I am? Are they going to arrest me or shoot me? They don't know who I am or what I'm doing here. So I thought about, well, what would I do if the flag was passing by? So I stood up and I put my hand over my heart. I didn't even look at him because I didn't want it to seem threatening. And I'm sure I looked completely ridiculous, but he walked over, shook my hand, looked me in the eye, and I'll never forget that moment looking into those beautiful blue eyes that had so much joy and so much love of life. And my life truly was never the same after that day. But they offered me a job for what I thought would be a short-term internship. And so as I was graduating college, I worked there as an intern. And then at the end of the internship, they hired me to be the chief of staff to the executive assistant to the chief of staff. And then a couple of years after working there, the executive assistant to the president himself, she retired, and they asked me to take that job. So you don't say no to a job opportunity like that. I was 6 months pregnant with my first baby, wasn't quite sure how I was going to navigate all of that, but wound up working for Ronald Reagan from 1989, right after he left the White House, until 1999, when he left the public eye, and consider myself to be the luckiest woman in the world to have had a front row seat to history and sit outside his office door every day for a decade.